A very joyful morning to one and all present here. I, Yogesh Bist, student of DME Media School, welcome you all to the second edition of World's first 10-day Digital Live International Conference, ICAN4. The conference is being organized by Delhi Metropolitan Education, GGSIPU, in collaboration with the School of Communication and Creative Arts, Deakin University, Melbourne, Australia. We are privileged that ICAN4 is being supported by Indian Council of Social Science Research, ICSSR. Before diving into today's technical session, I would like to brief you all about the previous editions of ICAN that were hugely successful. ICAN 1, held in March 2018, was based on the theme India and Changing Aspects of News. ICAN 2, held in November 2018, was all about Indian cinema and alternate networks. And ICAN 3, the first online edition of the conference, was held in June 2020, and the theme was issues of community and agenda and news, and with the hashtag Conference for Change. The theme for this year's conference is information, communication, and artificial networks, and the hashtag is communication redefined. ICAN4 is also supported by its 4 knowledge partners, KR Mangalam University, Gurugram, Haryana, Admas University, Kolkata, Makhanlal Chaturvedi National University of Journalism and Mass Communication, Bhopal, and Vigyan Prasad Government of India. Additionally, we have the Department of Communication and Journalism, Guwahati University as our academic partner. Our international partner is Institute for International Journalism, A.W. Scripps School of Journalism, Ohio University, USA. And our media partner is the Policy Times. ICAN is the flagship conference of DME Media School, and today it has made an international name for itself. ICAN4 is a clear example of it. We have participation of about 60 eminent academicians and researchers from 5 different continents and 11 countries, namely India, South Korea, Malaysia, Singapore, Bangladesh, USA, Mexico, France, Italy, Australia, and Ghana. More than 100 media educators and researchers have gathered to present their papers in the conference. We have a total of 36 live sessions, including 9 technical sessions, 3 workshops, 7 panel discussions, 3 special sessions, and 10 master classes. One of the most unique things about ICAN4 is that all 9 technical sessions are being chaired and co-chaired by a galaxy of intellectual women representing different states of the country. It's a matter of pride for us to be a part of DME, an institution that has not been starved by these tough times, but instead fueled by it. I would also like to tell everyone that at DME Media School, we have our student body, SPARK, that stands for Students with Positive Attitude and Resonating Communication. We also have our official newsletter named Journalism at the DME, a fortnightly publication that covers all the major activities happening in and out the campus. It is a student-centric newsletter carried out entirely by them, under the supervision of faculty members. DME TV, our official YouTube channel, where you can find the playlist related to all our events, lecture series, film festivals, and all conferences. You can also attend our live sessions through our official Facebook page. For more information, follow us on our social media handles. Links are being shared in the chat box. Now, I would like to request Professor Dr. Amrish Khanna, Dean DME Media School, Director DME Studios and Production, Director International Relations, DME, and convener of this program, to please say a few words.
Thank you, Yogesh. Welcome everybody in second session of 4th of July. This is the 3rd technical session. And in this 3rd technical session, we are going to discuss gender issues and other related issues. And there are presenters from all over the country making their paper presentation in this session. I believe that the morning session, which was attended by most of us, was on debunking misinformation, which has benefited us all. And so I think I will not say much because the session is already delayed for 10-15 minutes. So, and there are many presenters. So I would prefer that we should go ahead with this technical session.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. Coming on to today's technical session, This is on the theme of women emancipation, gender issues, and LGBTQ rights. The session is chaired by Professor Dr. Kiran Bala, Dean, School of Journalism and Mass Communication, K.R. Mangalam University, Gurugram, Haryana. Ma'am, we welcome you, and I am Sukriti Arora, Assistant Professor from DME Media School. Before we begin, I'd like our audience to know a little more about our chairperson. Ma'am is the Dean at School of Journalism and Mass Communication, K.R. Mangalam University, as I already mentioned, and a professional with diverse knowledge. She holds a doctorate in mass communication, is a gold medalist in both PG in mass communication and PG diploma in translation, postgraduate in English, PG diploma in marketing management, net qualified, and many more feathers in her cap. A qualified media personality, she's a keen researcher and a dedicated teacher with more than 19 years of experience at both college and university levels. Along with academics, she has contributed 5 years in All India Radio and almost 2 years in Doordarshan as a casual compere. She has also worked as sub-editor in National Daily Dainik Bhaskar. She has been awarded with Exceptional Women of Excellence by Women Economic Forum in April 2019. She has contributed for MOOC modules on Swayam, has published more than 15 research papers in various national and international journals, and presented more than 20 papers in national and international conferences. She has delivered many invites in India and abroad at institutes of repute. Furthermore, she has been guiding many research scholars at the doctoral level. Today, ma'am has graciously agreed to chair this session, and we are extremely happy to have with you us, ma'am. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Sukriti, for such a nice introduction. First of all, I would like to extend my thanks to Sana, because he is the person who has initiated this idea of this continuous conference for 10 days. I think this is something which is really remarkable, wonderful, and ongoing process. I think since first edition, we have been deliberating upon certain issues, and we are continuing that legacy in second edition also. And it's my privilege and honor to be part of this conference and chairing this session, not only as a partner of the conference, but I think this is something great. I would like to admire and appreciate Professor Amrish Saxena and Professor Susmita Bala, who have conceived this idea of having all chairs and all co-chairs as women. I think, sir, this is also something I would like to say, that although women are overly represented in this conference as far as these technical sessions are concerned, but then as far as workshops and master classes are concerned, I think that equality is not there. But one thing I would like to say, that it would have been great if there had been someone from LGBTQ community, because the session right now we are going to have is about that aspect of our society also, I think, which requires immense discussion and deliberations. Coming to the title, Women Emancipation, Gender Issues, and LGBTQ Rights. First of all, I think we need to have a glance at SDG 5, Sustainable Development Goals. Goal 5 says that achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. Again, I think there is some inequality when we are talking about only women and girls. Again, we left somewhere the third gender of our society, LGBTQ community, we left it. And when we say that gender equality and empowering all women and girls, again, 2015, we started with this SDG 5, but the reality is that world has seen all the great strides towards gender and sex equality, but then there is still a wide gap which remains there. Unfortunately, during Corona times, it's widening. Although previous reports of World Economic Forum, they also indicate that world's progress towards gender inequality is in economic participation, opportunity, educational attainment, health and survival, and political empowerment. Everywhere, gender inequality has been a persistent problem. in economic participation and opportunities, in health, in survival, everywhere the gap is widening. And same organization, World Economic Forum, it says that overall, it will take around 100 years to fill this global gender gap. And as far as economic gender gap is concerned, it will take more than 200 years to cover. Talking about again this SDG, Agenda 2030 for the Sustainable Development Goals, more than 193 countries, although they have signed this agenda to mandate to include LGBTQ community in their development initiatives and policies. But this underrepresentation of LGBTQ is persistent everywhere. I'm heading the ICC, Internal Complaints Committee of our university also. There are women's cells in all the organizations, but again, nowhere Vishakha guidelines talks about LGBTQ. It talks about sexual harassment against women at workplaces, but again we are missing that third gender while talking about such laws. Coming to the abstracts of the session, we have really received interesting abstracts for this session. More are on representation of women and third gender on cinema. I think the women representation in cinema all around the world, it seeks the respectability which was associated with the feminine role. But somehow there was no interest associated with the connotations of passivity or weakness. Today's cinema, the woman is rejecting the historical idea of women's divine composure in favor of their modern means having a love. So women representation in cinema, I would say that there are studies, they hypothesize that presence of women working in behind the scene roles, that would result in more on-screen representation of female characters and representation of conflict and resolution in a better way if they get more representation towards behind the cinema also. So we'll continue the discussion. I think our scholars, professors and teachers, all of them, they are having wonderful ideas. They have done really a great research work, which we are looking forward to. With this note, I would request Ms. Priti Arora to invite scholars to present their papers.
Thank you, Professor Bala, for your wonderful remarks. I would just mention a few common guidelines for our presenters, that you will each have a time of 7 to 8 minutes for presentation, followed by a Q&A round, and if possible, comments from Professor Kiran Bala as well. And please keep your presentations ready to be shared. The screen sharing rights will be given to you. I will call your name one by one. The first presenter that we have is Dr. Sunayan Bhattacharjee from School of Media and Communication, Adamas University, Kolkata. His paper is titled Feminist Messages in Guru Dutt's Pyasa, 1957, a distinctive case study. Dr. Bhattacharjee, please turn on your camera and you can share the screen.
Sure. Thank you, Professor Arora. Let me just share the screen. Is my presentation visible?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, the topic that I chose, it is not really contemporary per se. If we look at this topic, it's not really contemporary. We are talking about a movie that was made in the 1950s. But the reason why I picked up this movie was because even today in 2021, the movie seems all the more relevant. We are talking about Pyasa, which is considered to be one of the finest Indian movies that has ever been made. And it is also a commentary on the Indian society. And I have seen that there are a lot of papers, a number of research studies on Pyasa per se, but none of these research papers basically talked about the feminist angle of this movie. So the primary objective of this paper was to find out the feminist inclinations in the movie and try and analyze how Gurudutt looked at womanhood at that point in time back in 1957. So the title of the paper is Feminist Messages in Gurudutt's Pyasa, a distinctive case study. So it is a decidedly revelatory, it is deeply unnerving, it is characteristically melancholy, as is the case with most other Gurudutt movies. It is purposefully sardonic, and it could be decorated with one, all, or some, or any of these, adjectives for that matter. It is also a remorseless commentary on post-independence India and its social dichotomies, which was pretty much the case in 1957 and more or less remains the same even in 2021. The movie takes an unapologetic stance vis-a-vis its diagnosis and makes the audience contemplate, makes the audience think about. In fact, I remember when I first watched the movie, for some time I was sort of in a trance, and I tried understanding as to what the movie tells me or tells any other audience for that matter. It is told from the perspective of a failed yet talented poet, and the movie can be compared with an expository social trip, something that removes the pleasant myths about the society that we live in. Talking about it a little further, it could be considered to be a narrative that captures the very enigma of the Indian existence. At a time when the country was passing through a severe economic crunch, we're talking about the 1950s, the movie chronicles the story of an uptight young man who faces continuous rejection subject to his refusal to compromise. It was deeply inspired by the Italian neorealism, something that you all know. Although it is inspired by Italian neorealism, the fact remains that it is essentially Indian in nature. If you look at the movie, it's essentially Indian in nature. While realism constitutes the base of the movie, melodrama permeates it at multiple points, thus essentially rendering it an Indian character for that matter. But as relevant as the movie is today in 2021, the movie catches attention because of the presence of two diametrically opposite yet powerful female characters. One is Meena and the other is Gulabo. And that's what we are trying to analyze today. Without getting into any sort of value judgments, often we see that in movies there are value judgments. It would suffice to say that the movie moves ahead subject to the presence of Meena and Gulabo. Any qualitative analysis of Pyasa can't really be complete without a qualitative evaluation of the two women characters. This paper tries to uncover the feminist inclinations through the diegetic and thematic deconstructions of the two female characters. While doing so, the study keeps a tab on the motives, on the dominant social motives of that time, and links it to the larger theme of the movie. In terms of the methodology, three primary film theories have been used. One or the author theory, obviously. The other is the apparatus theory, and the other is the feminist film theory. There are subjectivities in this study, but I'll try and keep those subjectivities as less as I possibly can. Now, when we try and deconstruct the movie using the author theory, we see that the movie has a deep empathy for women. And we all know that Gurudutt always had this empathy for women, for that matter, from an ideological stance as well. While Meena and Gulabo are shown as two contradictory characters, both are revealed as victims of a patriarchal system. While Meena is shown to be selfish and narcissistic, it becomes clear from the movie's diagnosis that the values that even Meena represent are essentially the result of a patriarchal society. Coming to Gulabo, she's a sex worker and hence obviously a social outcast. She's also a victim of the social order. She still has managed to keep her humanity intact, something that probably drives the movie as well. And we look at the song sequence, Jine Naaz Hai, Hind Par Wo Kahan Hai, we understand the deep empathy for women that is reflected in this song for that matter. This anguish and the resultant empathy for the sex workers become clearly visible as he increasingly associates himself with Gulab. Throughout the movie, there is a clear attempt to emancipate women, if you want to look at it that way. While the tragic fate of Meena, and her marriage with Mr. Ghosh is a clear statement from the author about the obvious lacunae of the institution of marriage, which he clearly had a doubt about. Vijay's acceptance of Gulabo as his obvious companion elicits questions vis-a-vis the societal concept of sexual and feminine purity, so to say, quote unquote feminine purity. Throughout the movie, the director unapologetically questions society's stand on multiple issues, including the concept of so-called womanhood. Now, moving on to the next theory, the apparatus film theory, and I'm not getting down what the theory is all about. We have to understand that Pyasa was released at a time when cinema was pretty much at its nascent stage, at least in India for that matter. It wouldn't be wrong to say that the movie was years ahead of its time, as I noted in the beginning as well, that even in 2021, it seems equally relevant. Thus, the larger audience didn't have the capacity to comprehend the movie in 1957, be it in terms of the feminist messages that it was, emitting, or in terms of other parameters. However, since the movie was entrenched in realism and melodrama permeated it, as I talked about in the beginning, a significant section at least understood the story, for that matter. Indian cinema until that point in time was dictated by remorseless populism, and Vyasa was a welcome break. While a certain section of the audience found it outrageous in terms of the depiction of women characters, the other section did find it revolting and cathartic at the same time. The fact that Gulabo, a sex worker, was preferred over the protagonist is equally representative of what the movie actually assumes. Contemporary feminist scholars might look at the traditionalist depiction of women, but we are talking about 1957, and that has to be remembered always. Finally, which is the most important film theory, I think, is the feminist film theory, and my studies based on Laura Mulvey's visual cinema concept of gaze, the three different types of gaze. Although Pyasa is a little different from the other films released at that point in time, it does have its moments of populism as well, which kind of moves towards misogyny. The concept of male gaze is as much a reality in Pyasa as any other commercial movie. If we look at the character of Meena, she's luminously beautiful and gorgeous. The filmmaker could have chosen someone less glamorous, but he didn't do so. Purely because at that point in time as well, I mean, in 1957, in 1956, in 1950s, deglamorized women was not considered to be a part of cinema per se. Deglamorized man were considered to be a part of cinema, but not deglamorized women. While the diegetic reason could be the fact that a successful man like Mr. Ghosh would obviously marry a beautiful woman, but the subtle reason is obviously the fact that cinema always wanted glamorous women. Indian movies allowed deglamorized male protagonists while not allowing deglamorized female protagonists. Even if we look at the character of Gulabo, she's way too beautiful for a sex worker in Kolkata. Gulabo is way more gorgeous than a normal sex worker. While one definitely appreciates the subtle feminist messages in Pyasa, the fact remains that it also uses the concept of male gaze to its advantage. Also, it can be argued that both the women in the movie have incidental roles and just play up their roles as part of the narrative, which is what Laura Mulvey also said in her seminal paper. One can go a little further and even say that the protagonist is given the leeway to choose one of the women at the end, thereby establishing patriarchy again, which basically contradicts the very purpose of what this study is all about. At multiple points in the movie, Meena is repentant for the choices she makes along the course of her life, which is again a patriarchal moral supremacy. While the absence for choice of women constitutes one side of the story, the other side of the story is that there is a constant blame on women for making the choices that she does. It would suffice to say that Pyasa is guilty of the same feminist crimes the other movies of that time committed. The bare fact that the movie blames the choice of one woman while celebrating the choice of another is anti-feminist by its very definition. To conclude, Pyasa would continue to haunt cinemas for many more years. And the one part about great movies is that you can see them over and over again without ever exhausting their content. It is anti-establishment tone and its rejection of the traditional societal values make it decidedly different from other movies of the time. However, the director also tries to redraw the contours of feminism. I don't know whether intentionally or unintentionally, that's not a part of the study, and womanhood through this movie. This movie makes some obvious feminist mistakes that some of the other movies at the same time make. Thus, Pyasa is a tale of both hope and despair in terms of the societal meaning that it depicted and in terms of cinema as well. In a way, the movie is representative of a decided change in filmmaking norms back during the 1950s and the 1960s, at least in India. Thank you very much for your patience listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bhattacharjee. Over to Dr. Kiran Bala.
Yeah, Dr. Sunayan, it was really, I think, great work you have done.
Thank you, madam.
Gurudutt was way ahead from, his contemporary directors. So while choosing a sex worker over the other beautiful female, that was intentional, that was not unintentional, we can say, because I think the way Gurudutt portrayed women in his films, I think it's different from others. So he was not following the norms of the society or norms of Indian cinema, what other directors are doing. Whatever he wanted to do, whatever he was thinking, he portrayed in his films. So that, I think analyzing, deconstructing any film, that is also, a really, really great job. It requires a lot of efforts to deconstruct a film. So at times I tell my students, if you choose deconstruction as your method of study, then you'll have to do, so much of work. So Dr. Snan, good work, great work, I would say. And if you can expand this paper a bit, more, you can send it to a good journal also for publication, because
So, ma'am, it's a part of a bigger study that I'm doing on the works of Gurudev, basically. So this is just a part of a bigger study. This is just one part of the study, in fact. So I'm doing an analysis of Kagaz Ke Phool and Chaudhary Ka Chand as well.
Yeah, because Kagaz Ke Phool was also milestone of its time, the first CinemaScope movie that was made in India. Great, Dr. Snan.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bhattacharya. You may please stop the screen share from your end. I would now like to invite our next presenter, Ms. Momita De Das, School of Media, Communication and Fashion, Adamas University, Kolkata. The title of her paper is The Delineation of Women in Media Coverage Through Newspaper Extracts. Ms. Momita, you may please raise your hand in the chat box so that our technical team can see you and quickly give you the sharing rights.
Good morning. My paper is on delineation of women in media coverage through newspaper extracts. A gender equality, equal society would be one where the word gender does not exist, where everyone can be themselves, by Gloria Steinem. This is a kind of society we dream of. We aspire to achieve an egalitarian society wherein there will be never ending in every sphere of socio-economic development of the country. Everyday newspaper, Kolkata and the nationwide always inform about women issues, especially maybe it of abuse, molestation or some kind of atrocities. Why women? Why women are only victims? The author of the paper preferred to narrate the situation of women in our city and even on pan-Indian perspective to news extracts of Kolkata's major newspaper of January issue of Times of India, Kolkata. So my objectives and aims is to seek and highlight the intensity of exploitation in the pan-Indian perspective, with special emphasis on the eastern metropolitan city of Kolkata. The research paper intends to show the representation of women in national publication, which will bring forth the varied issues of abuse and also other issues which are of daily basis, how the mainstream media publication cover in their newspaper. Although there are an impressive number of researches on graphical visualization on newspaper, magazine, even television, films, but scant attention has been given to how the issue of journalistic writings on crime and atrocities against women in India. So actually, this is also on larger scale. There's just one part of my study I have quoted here. So the literature review says there are certain kind of literature review. The articles like Dowry Murder, an example of violence against women by Jane Root. When homes are torture chambers by Vimochana's work with the victims of the violence by Vimochana. And also the article entitled Empowerment Approaches Gender-Based Violence, Women's Court in Delhi Slums are some of the articles by entitled in Urban Women in Contemporary India. In the same book, the chapters on portrayals of sexual violence in popular, Hindi books and all, by Srividya Subramaniam and Mary Beth Oliver. So these are some of the literature review. The research methodology, this is a qualitative study through content analysis of newspaper cuttings that I have collected, and I have portrayed in what are the issues that come up in a daily basis and what kind of atrocities that we see and what kind of issues that come over. So these are some of the cuttings in varied kinds of abuses recorded in Kolkata. Like there are, date-wise, January 8th, it says screams, shot us, didn't think twice before giving the car a chase, rescuers. So it's a in a city when women are working and women are going out and there for daily either for work or for studies, and it's quite normal that we hire a cab at night, and that's a kind of in urban cities how women are facing. Then there's one story on a girl sexually had his home set fire. Okay, then the homemaker set on fire. So this is a kind of exploitation that we know. Domestic violence is one of the most contentious issues. Then you have this Salt Lake woman molested over parking row. Okay, so she had parked her car and she was molested. Salt Lake is a very prominent area in Kolkata. And then you have this one held of molestation, January 15, and then you again have January 17, stalker tosses starch replica into girls' home. It's like there's a jilted lover who is reacting to the right to say no. There's the issue of no is not there. And then there's this very interesting case study which was there. I belong to this department of journalism, international relations. I studied here, and I'm shameful that one of my professors, he commented on Facebook, a very a kind of derogatory comment he made. He said that a virgin girl is like a is really desirable as a partner, and a girl is like it's a cold rain, while okay, I can't see the wave stream properly, so I can't read this. Can this, right. Okay, so he said that it's a part of she's biologically sealed from birth. So he's comparing to a commodity like a cold rain with a girl's virginity. That was a kind of statement of JU professor, an educated person. He made that comment on his Facebook, and it became a totally chaotic, in campus. And he was, for the timing, with the uproar in the JU campus, professor was relieved of his duty for some while. For 6 months, he was not there in the campus. And Leena Gangopadhyay, chairperson of the National Women Commission, she also said that this kind of mindset from an educated person, what can we expect from the other people if an educated person or professor is saying this kind of comment on his social media platform? Like there's another plight of bar dancers. If you remember, in Maharashtra, that was banned in that period. And what was the plight they were facing? You know that bar dancers had always been rebuked by the society at large. We have never thought process that what actually led him into this profession. So the choice of profession was looked down upon, and that is also not desirable in this 21st century. Then you have this very famous Sabrimala case study. If you remember, this also rocked our country, and it also associated the freedom of religion and the right to belief system. And Sabrimala actually, it depicts that women still don't have the right to religion, right to worship, even after so many decades, so many centuries. And in the garb of religion, we always put forth that women are, when the menstruating women are impure and they are not allowed. And these things are being projected. And Salman Rushdie rightly quoted that very moment, that for God's sake, open the universe a little more, but don't tear it apart. Then there's another case study, 24-week abortion plea in Kolkata, that really highlighted and changed the course of structure of right to body, of the right to abortion, of the decision that women should have right on her own body, when to have child and when not to have child. And this was a kind of case study which really moved and rocked the city and the country, and later on it had court judgment whether it could be extended to 24 weeks or not. Then I come to analysis and discussion. That study recorded the varied incidences of women issues occurred in the city and parts of India in the month of January 2019. It is interesting to know that number of times the women issues had been raised in just a month is 61 times in a month, leading to an average of 219 days throughout the year. So you can say that it has been more the position in the society, the kind of news that comes, generally those are very negative news. Those are very few that we get positive news, and the position in the society, how they are represented, how they are wrote. And the question as to whether crime against women is really increasing or whether a false impression is created because it is being reported to a greater degree than before is a debatable one. There is a great increase in both incidents and reporting. The increased incidents can be inferred to types of violence has also been relatively new, like cyber crimes have also, I have not included here because it was not within that month, but cyber crimes has also been a new kind of exploitation we can see, like, like CSAM, if we get to know about this during this COVID-19, we know domestic violence, and the CSAM material also had a new kind of cyber crimes also had. At the same time, it must be emphasized that in spite of this awareness, the proportion of reported crimes to total crimes remains very low. So reporting itself is very low. And much of it caters to the city-centric. It's not in the rural sector or the margin or any nooks and corners of the state. So it's very limited in that sense. So my conclusion is the need of the hour is active participation of women associated with legal support, so that they can come and they can fight their own and fight. And this is a uniform society that we aspire for, and for uniform society we need powerful women in the position who can make decision for the women and do away this kind of discrimination, abuse that we have or in the society. Thank you. If you have any questions, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Momita. We do have a question from one of our faculty members, Ms. Shruti. She's asking, how does the level of participation and influence of women in the media also have implications for coverage of women's issues?
Yeah, this is very interesting question, but my study does not speak of representation of women in media. This is about what kind of stories that is being covered in the newspapers. This is very interesting, and I have said that this study is also a section of the larger kind of a study that I'm going to take in the future, because how the kind of journalistic writings, in the specific metro city, like this is from Kolkata, like from the Delhi, what kind of journalistic writings, or how the kind of words are being used, what kind of, whether the kind of crimes are different from the cities, So this is just a part, and thank you for the question. And representation of women in media is very, very low. Just like, we talk about the Dalit community is not representative, but even here also, women are very low, though women are coming to the scene, but we can see it's the equality is not there, representation, especially in the decision level, in the editorial level, like where the decision can be of women, that is very, very rare and very low in that sense. Yes, any other?
Thank you. I now move on to Professor Kiran Bala.
Yeah, Ms. Momita, I think you have done so much of efforts on your study that you have undertaken. Really, we need such studies. Gender studies require so much of work, so much of research work still needs to be done. But there are two aspects of this study. One, as a social science or media researcher, and the other angle is gender. So first question is about the research, like why you have taken only Times of India and only month of January, any specific reason behind it?
Nothing specific behind it. Yes, I could have taken some other newspaper or make it compared to other newspaper. That would have been another aspect of thing. But I took it because I have worked myself in Times of India. So being part of that newspaper, I like to wanted to know and explore more of what Times of India as one of the prominent newspaper in and one of the most circulated in Kolkata circuit, how they represent this kind of study of women, how they study this atrocities across. So that's the thing.
Ms. Momita, I would like to say one thing here. Like whenever we conduct such studies, when we go for content analysis or such studies, there are many factors which, because of those factors, there may be poor coverage or the coverage may be more. There may be many reasons. So you can't replicate the same number to other months also. When you're saying that 16 days multiplied by 12 and this number, so in 365 days, these many days women issues are being covered in the newspapers. So we can't simply replicate if the study that or the sample that we have taken is not representative of the entire population. One Times of India, only one newspaper can't give us outlook or can't give us the kind of representation women news are having in newspaper. One. Second, only 1 month we can't consider it as that only 1 month study can give us that kind of figure for an entire year. Another thing, did you take articles, features or editorials into consideration while doing this study?
Yes, there was one, only the news Gopala, on this Sabrimala issue. I have included Amulya Gopalakrishnan editorial. I didn't find an editorial as such, only news were there. Editorial as such was not there in that very one. So I have tried to cover the entire, the kind of news that only women-centric, but not only I have find the Amulya Gopalakrishnan as the editorial.
So all women-centric news, but no success stories of women, no inspiring or motivating story, all these news related to crime or injustice or inequality.
So that's very interesting that only 1 month, I do agree that it's only 1 month limited, but only 1 month, there's no such, success stories of, that's the main thing, that very negative issue. Depressing for a woman that everything can not be, in negative sense. So yes, there was no such.
Because there must be some news related to a woman getting a higher position in her job, or someone being appointed as CEO of a company on leadership positions, or a political leaders. There must be some news related to women. I think in general.
No, it was not there in that month, so I would have included.
That's very surprising, because only negative news, that is also something. It's very difficult to understand the reason behind it, because there are so many inspiring and success stories in the newspapers.
Yes.
As far as gender issues are concerned. Another thing, Momita, I would like to suggest you that whenever you are working on any research, kindly have a theoretical framework. Read about its theories, and then go for your study. Only then you'll be able to come up with better findings, and there will be no subjectivity around it, because here you can see subjectivity of the researcher, because I was working with Times of India, so that's why I was taking Times of. It was convenient for me to study January, so I was studying January month. So I think these things, all of us, we need to take care whenever we are pursuing any research, any undertaking there, any study we are taking. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Momita, and thank you, Professor Kiran Bala. I would now invite our next scholar, that is Ms. Mihika Sengupta from MAHARASHTRA International Institute of Research and Studies, Faridabad, Haryana. The title of her paper is Coming Out of Closet, Analysis of the Emerging Third Gender Hero in Popular Hindi Cinema Post-1990s. Ms. Mihika, you can please turn on your camera and share your screen.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mihika Sengupta. I'm from MAHARASHTRA International Institute of Research and Studies, and I'm a research scholar. And my topic is Coming Out of the Closet, Emerging Third Gender Hero of the Popular Hindi Films, Analyzing New Narrative. The first point is, the past couple of years have seen an unanticipated change in the representation and understanding of those individuals who practice alternate sexuality other than the prevailing heterosexuality. This occurred because of the three significant decisions given by the Delhi Court and Supreme Court in accordance to Segment 377 of the Indian Constitution, which hushed every one of the presumptions and unfortunate underlying meanings about queerness. While in 2009, sex among consenting same-sex couples was decriminalized, all the people practicing alternate sexuality were recognized as a third gender in 2014, and the recent repeal of Section 377 of the Indian Penal Code is an apt historical moment to assess the interrelation of queer empowerment, social justice, and popular culture inscriptions. The post-liberalization arena of the media of the 1990s was initiated by anxiety and panic around the subject, as well as the unfolding of sexual discourse. Many plays and documentaries began to be staged and screened, but it was with Deepa Mehta's Fire, which was released in 98 in India, about two women occupying the space conventionally reserved for heterosexual lovers, followed by Onir's My Brother Nikhil, about two men in a relationship and their journey to defeat HIV, that started India's first public discourse on queerness. But these films couldn't bring any significant changes in the way they were socially constructed in popular Hindi films. These films portrayed and used third gender stereotypes mostly for comic relief and ended up validating those stereotypes. Films such as Dostana and Kal Ho Na Ho tried engaging in gay conversations openly, but succumbed to heteronormativity in the end. The films utilized the trope of mistaken identity to present a homosexual element, for most part for satire. Such examples show that the number of commercial films that have involved in genuine, serious, and accurate representation of other sexuality narratives has been practically missing. So this is a brief about Section 377. It is a 19th century British colonial law where sex is against the order of nature was a punishable offense with a life sentence in prison. It is used in the Indian legal institution to criminalize gay sex. On September 6, 2018, the Supreme Court in India abolished this section and decriminalized homosexuality and considered the legislation as a violation of fundamental rights guaranteed by India's constitution. The effect of Section 377 and its decisions on the evolution of LGBTQ plus representation and Hindi film, I have divided this into three parts: pre-2009, wherein I will mapping the context, post-2009 to pre-2018, the making the shift phase, and post-2018, that is the current scenario. The purpose of the study, it is to explore how bidding adieu to Section 377 of the Indian Penal Code and the emergence of identity discourses have impacted the representation of queer characters in commercial Hindi cinema, to look at films both preceding to as well as after the ripping down of Article 377 in order to map a change towards a post-liberal consideration of homosexual relation as a discursive subject in films, and third, to locate the emerging third gender hero in the trajectory of mainstream Hindi film by contemplating films after the coming down of Article 377 in 2018. Methodology, qualitative narrative analysis of two films, Ek Ladki Ko Dekha To and Shubh Mangal Zyada Savdhan. Themes on lead characters and contextual narratives, that is identity, love, coming out, and family, were collected to reveal the meaning of the messages that the films represent about queerness. Now, mapping the context, till the 90s, Bollywood was still struggling to portray women on screen that it would think of any other gender at that time. After India opened its gate to the outside world in 1991, that liberalization happened, and with it came newer talent, new ideas, and new concepts that were already into the already thriving Bollywood. Similarly, the concept of alternate sexuality also came into the foray. Mahesh Bhatt's Sadak, A commercially successful film had a hijra playing a significant role, but as a villain, the film validated the already existing stereotype connected to hijra, that they are mostly bad people who are into human trafficking business. Another film of his, Tamanna, shows the hijra as working hard to support her mother, finds an abandoned girl, and raises her. This film, however, won a national award but made no money like Sadak. In an interview, the filmmaker shared his opinion as to why the first film was a hit among the masses and the second was not. He said that the first film reinstated what the audience already believed, but the second film questioned their belief system by showing a sensitive hijra. By and by, none of these movies endeavored to locate the hijra within a bigger social parentage of the hijra community in India. These films with hijra as protagonists notably came up after the hijras were granted voting rights in 1994. More commercial films like Raja Hindustani, Auntie Number One had the heroine accompanied by an effeminate man and a masculine woman, and the hero cross-dressing as a woman to get the love of his life, respectively, were generalizations being used for eliciting laughter and dismissal of alternate sexuality. The male-centric nation, with their adoration for the hetero characters, wouldn't fret obliging the above pictures of alternate sexuality as they confirmed to their generally existing stereotypes, and this was joined by no public hatred brought about by these movies, not even the fundamentalist right, who were inflexible to raid theaters with the arrival of fire. With the turn of the new millennium, that is the 2000, films like Kal Ho Na Ho, Masti, Kya Cool Hai Hum, Golmaal, Honeymoon Travels Private Limited, etc., did not outrightly show any person from the LGBTQ plus gamut, but they did have passing remarks and references made on them. For example, Kal Ho Na Ho had the famous Kantabai, who never saw both the male protagonists together, who whenever saw both the male protagonists together, either hugging or sleeping beside each other, thought of them having an affair, with the actor's expression, the background score during those scenes, and the shaking of the tray that Kantabai held. All these things winded up to erupt humor and comedy. Nonetheless, the two critical movements in the direction of queer movies from India before the pursuing down of 377 in 2009 were first given by the arrival of Fire, and the second was by the arrival of Dostana. While Fire, a not-so-commercial film, introduced the portrayal of non-hetero love, after 12 years in 2008, Dostana was the first mainstream Hindi film from India to exclusively engage in queer narratives, utilizing the tool of mistaken identity. While Dostana can't genuinely make a case for the first gay film in India, it is one of the first primarily commercial Hindi films from Bollywood to unequivocally participate in a queer discourse through rerouting conventional customs and denaturalizing family structures, accordingly rethinking Indianness through an eccentric queer lens. Moving on to making the shift post 2009 and to pre-2018. The reading down of Section 377 of the IPC seems to come as an obvious aftermath of the increasing globalization and liberalization. It saw the successive release of two films the very next year, in which the queer man was brought out of the closet and not laughed off as an abnormal, I am and don't know why. It wouldn't be wrong to put that Bollywood, in its own little way, influenced the 2009 Delhi High Court judgment that decriminalized homosexuality, and nor it would be too untimely to even consider saying that the judgment had its impact or will affect Bollywood. I Am is the perfect example of this, as Unir was quick to make a then and now film. While regional cinema was doing great with Rituparna Ghosh leading the Bengali film industry with his masterpieces on alternate sexualities and getting into the living room of Bengali middle-class families, contradictory trends have been running concurrently in Hindi mainstream cinema. While on one hand, a film like English Winglish, without delving into too many complexities, advocates a peaceful coexistence of everyone from a gay teacher to students from all over the world in the true spirit of a liberal democracy. Films like Bol Bachchan had gay references used in an attempt to elicit humor. While most of the films with any amount of LGBTQI plus representation had gay portrayals more, films like Angry Indian Goddesses, Margarita with a Straw brought lesbian relationship into the foreground. Till now, the representation of LGBTQI plus community was in small portion in films. They were either in supporting role or were present only for a few scenes or were intertwined with any other story. They never really had a full film to themselves where they or their stories can be the protagonist or, to be more precise, the hero of the film. The current scenario post 2018, Ayushmann Khurrana openly declares his love for another man in the film Shubh Mangal Zyada Savdhan against the backdrop of a popular Hindi song Pyar Bina Chain Kaha Re. This is a sign of evolution in Hindi cinema, specifically because some regional and art house films were already quite progressive than the Hindi industry. This film, along with a few more, attempted at bridging the gap between the society and the queer community with the casting of a mainstream actor portraying queer character and leading the film as a hero. This evolution came to be seen as a byproduct of a ban on homosexuality that was there since the British era. As stated before, LGBTQ characters were only visible in few scenes in movies, and their story would disappear among the stories of the bigger actors, and or they would adopt the trope of mistaken identity. But as Supreme Court's verdict came out in September 2018, another film of Sonam Kapoor released immediately in the next year titled Ek Ladki Ko Dekha To, which changed the entire outlook of the LGBTQ portrayal by the main lead mainstream actress playing the role of a queer. But while the above cited films have been able to start a dialogue among the Hindi film audience and received appreciation for the same, there also have been the pioneer for emerging third gender hero of the popular Hindi films. There have been a few opposition and resistance from the queer community. They argue that they're not able to connect to what is showing on the screen. Filmmaker on it told in an interview that he does not identify himself with any of the characters showing in the mainstream cinema portraying LGBT issues. But on the other hand, a queer himself, Siddhant Kumar Behera, states that a mainstream Bollywood star like Ayushmann Khurrana playing a gay man in a regular masala romantic tale is actually like a blessing in disguise and is important for different reasons. He further elaborates that as activists, they frequently wind up reaching either closeted queer individuals or the individuals who take interest in the LGBTQ community. Even after all the pride marches, events, and brands embracing queerness, there is a vacuum that exists between the queer community and the majority of people from the middle class of India, which gets filled by actors of such stature. In this day and time, mainstream cinema is not only the only resort to normalize alternate sexualities and give them screen space. With India trying to turn into a digitized nation and with the rise in OTT platforms, creators of LGBT content are getting more freedom to experiment and play with the script than mainstream cinema. OTT films such as Four More Shots, Made in Heaven, etc., working their way towards eliminating stereotypes. An OTT platform inclusive of the LGBT community and working in the same. So why are these films important? Because they are the first mainstream Indian films to represent lesbian and gay as protagonists to the abolishment of Section 377 in India. These films map the progress of the third gender portrayal on screen from just being a sidekick into the emerging third gender hero of popular Hindi films. From Spire to Shubh Mangal Zyada Savdhan, Bollywood has traveled a long way, but this journey from just being a comic relief to be portrayed as a protagonist of the film has not been a bed of roses. It is essential to map this shift from the incidental and uncooperative depictions to direct references to queerness in Hindi films. The lead character's identity narrative in Ek Ladki Ko Dekha To, Sweetie is shown to be demure, while Kuhu, her partner is absolutely invisible. Sahil is shown to be as a male ally. In Shubh Mangal Zyada Savdhan, Karthik, that is Ayushmann Khurrana, is shown to be flamboyant and openly gay, while as Aman, he is shown to be reserved and a straight passing man. Coming
Ms.
out of the
Mehika, I'd like to remind you that you have exceeded the time limit. So if you could just brief it a little. Thank you.
Yeah. So coming out of the closet narrative in Ek Ladki Ko, it dramatically portrays Sweetie coming out when Sahil proposes her. It highlights the complexity of the decision to stay in rather than come out. In Shubh Mangal, Karthik is open and unashamed about his sexuality, while Aman is more concerned about coming out to his family out of love and respect for them. In both validate queer love and while Ek Ladki Ko uses an ambiguity trope to portray lesbianism, Shubh Mangal normalizes queer feelings and desires with explicit expression of love and sexual desires. And family attribute in both the films, they highlight familial, homophobic and heteronormative beliefs, which are entwined with patriarchy and with being expected to take the family lineage forward. So in conclusion, I would say emerging third gender hero, unlike other films where a third gender character was used just as a sidekick or as a small part of the film, contributing nothing to the story, now films like Ek Ladki and Shubh Mangal have given the third gender characters the representation they needed and required as a hero of the film, wherein a hero is the one around whom the film and the story rotates, giving them more space and time to convey their issues. Audience acceptability. Although these films have led to increased visibility and acceptance of the third gender community, it has been noticed that the acceptability of gay characters in films is still much more prevalent than the lesbian characters. There is gendering even in acceptability, as the main audience who watch these films are mainly heterosexual. Nascent stage, even though there have been emergences of Hindi films trying to normalize third gender portrayal and have opened up a conversation, there is a whole LGBTQ industry which caters solely to its community people and makes film for and by them. Hindi film industry is, however, still at a nascent stage and are still taking baby steps towards third gender presentation and trying to revamp the prior customs and tropes. And lastly, I would say, since the Hindi film industry is an essential cultural referent in India and is a powerful enough to influence general public perspectives and thinking on issues, how it addresses the LGBTQIA+ community is of significant concern and is subsequently worth discussing and monitoring. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mehika. I have a question from one of the participants asking, do you feel these alternative narratives of sexuality are actually progressive and or just cases of token representation simply for the sake of promotion?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Well, I think these films do not fully represent lot debate going on casting those people who are actually from the community, like casting LGBT actors for playing themselves in the films. But I think because in India, Bollywood goes to the mass audience. So I think when mass audience for reaching out to the mass people, these films are a good way in actually starting a conversation. They don't need to teach us what is right, what is wrong. It actually need to start a conversation. They actually need to normalize the thing that yes, there can exist another gender, another a person with another sexuality, and that you can be in the same, and that you can stay in the same room with that person. It starts the conversation. There is no need to be getting educated from it in an academic way. We already have LGBT filmmakers like Faraz Ansari with films like Sheer Korma and doing the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, Professor Bala.
Yes, Mehika, I think the paper you have presented is part of your PhD thesis.
Yes.
Yeah, it
Yes.
was very much visible with the review and the journey that you have projected in your paper. Was there any theoretical framework that you applied to study?
Actually, ma'am, I'm starting my journey in understanding the theories. So I haven't used it in this paper, but I am still studying the theories to be able to use it in my next research paper.
Yeah, because transgender theory and queer theories, these are very,
Yes,
very
ma'am.
important gender theories.
Yes,
Whenever you are, trying to pursue such work. Great, Mika, keep on working.
thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mihika. I believe there is one question that is coming up from one of the participants, our student, but he's still just taking a moment to type it. In the meantime, I would request Ms. Momita Das to be ready with her next presentation. She has her second paper presentation for the same session. And this paper she has co-written with Ms. Shatakshi Ganguly, who is unfortunately not present today. The paper is titled An Ode to Rainbow, LGBTQ Rights. Ms. Momita, I request you to please turn on your camera and share your screen for the presentation. We can take the question for Ms. Mihika later on after your presentation is done.
Again, thank you for the opportunity. I'm sorry, my co-author cannot be present to present her paper. So this is about an ode to rainbow, LGBTQ rights. We just have another excellent paper by Mihika ma'am. So this is by introduction, American Psychological Association of Homosexuality in July 1994 reiterated homosexuality in the following observations. They say the research on homosexuality is very clear. Homosexuality is neither mental illness nor moral depravity. It is simply the way a minority of our population expresses human love and sexuality. The Stonewall Riot, June 28, 1969, being the spine of the prodigious movement of eternal love that comes with no boundaries, gave the ultimate turning point for whole mankind. The Indian Supreme Court's historic judgment on 6th September 2018 ruled that consensual adult gay sex is not a crime. With the partial repeal of Section 377, it signifies the sexual autonomy held as a vital pillar and an inglorious liberty, individual liberty. My aims and objectives, the objective of this research paper is linked to an analysis of how the news on the Supreme Court's verdict on Section 377 was handled by India's eastern metropolitan capitals, regional Bengali and English newspapers, how in particular the media reacted on the issue. The research paper focuses on the relevant news articles and reports published on the issue and contains brief summary of the personal interviews of representatives of the LGBTQ community taken by the authors of this paper to substantiate their research findings. The intended goal of this research paper is to reveal the outlook and the role of Indian media and society at large on the sensitive issue and how constructive role the media underplay to shape public opinion and effect on the environment. So the research methodology has taken by qualitative approach to their study. They have adapted to content analysis from the newspaper extracts of major English and Bengali newspapers of Kolkata edition to analyze the media's reaction to the repeal of Section 377 by Supreme Court. Further, they have also taken interviews of 4 prominent LGBTQ community representatives from Kolkata to share their views on the issue. The literature review, now let's find out how we tend to identify LGBTQ community in academic purview. Some people simply use queer as a synonym for lesbian, gay. It is a term used as a convenient umbrella for all sexual minorities, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender. However, in the context of gender studies, we argue that queer is not simply a synonym for lesbian or gay, rather, as Michael Warner defines it itself, against regimes of the normal rather than heterosexuality. In 1990, Judith Butler founded the queer theory, which, though written with a feminist agenda, but raised certain pertinent issues, like she argued both first and second wave of feminism had simply failed and locked bodies into the limiting hierarchy binary of masculine and feminine. Therefore, Butler called for a gender politics which could see gender as a more fluid variable, which was not limited to having to slot into this binary system. I'll just give some references to past legacy that we have in India. The LGBT community isn't a trend or abnormal as it is called by the citizens of India. Rather, India being so rich in mythology has defied the binary, having glamorizing and worshipping the prominent LGBT figures like Shikhandi in Mahabharata, the Ardhanarishwar depicted with the female form of Parvati on the left, and the masculine attributes of Shiva on the right. Bhagavati Devi Samba, Arjuna and Mahabharata as Brahannala, the Kama Sutra, the Namalvar, Ila, Budha Graha, Mitra and Varuna, Agni, the Khajuraho temples, etc. The citizens constantly deny their existence. The constant strive to establish a LGBTQ community in the perspective of humankind is never ending. So these are some of the images that I have. The Polat shows Shikhandi is there, Ardhanarishwar, Bhagavati Devi and Brihannala, and so on and so forth. The Supreme Court judgment that Vihika just presented in her paper, I would just, I'm not getting to just briefly say, the Supreme Court with the judgment legalized gay sex in India, reflecting how the discussion about sexuality has moved from presence into mainstream of Indian public discourse. So the content analysis that I'll be sharing right now, that is the Indian media stake on Section 377, both regional and English dailies. The countrywide newspapers had been almost invariably affirmative and constructive in reporting the Supreme Court's momentous judgment to interpret Section 377 of the Indian Penal Code and legalize gay sex in India, reflecting how the discussion about sexuality has moved from presence to the mainstream Indian rights forum. All the dailies covered the verdict, but they vary on the depth and gist of their reportage, offering a few glimpses, like in Bengali newspaper, like in Pratidin, they have covered in the front page. Then you have Anandabajar Potrika and Eshomai, they also had this very prominent in front pages. And in Bortoman and Ajkal, they have devoted front pages to the Kolkata bridge collapse that was very discussed in that period. Ajkal carried the news in the inside page of page 5. So that is about Bengal newspaper. Then English newspapers, the Times of India and the Telegraph gave the most extensive coverage to the verdict. The headline of the Times of India was Independence Day 2, and the Telegraph carried the header as Equality. The other newspaper of the city's editions to offer a generous outlook like Economic Times, Asian, the Hindu, the Statesman. These are some of the glimpses, like I have already, the Hindu says SC decriminalizes homosexuality, then Telegraph as equality, the front pages. And then you have this from Economic Times, front page, victory for LGBT rights, HC decriminalizes Section 377. Then Times of India with the front page, Independence Day 2, so very prominent coverage. Then you have in Asian Age front page, SC writes a 158-year-old wrong. Then the Statesman comes as in the front page, SC decriminalizes gay sex. Then this is, I'm sorry, people don't know Bangla, I'm just saying, in Bangla newspapers like in Anandabajar Potrika, very prominent, one of the Telegraph's partner. Bharat Prem Kotha. And then this is from Ajkal, this is Bharoter Akashe Ramdhanu. This is an insider story on page 5. And they have added Rituparna Ghosh's image from his film Chitrangada. Then other newspaper like A. Shomai, the Bengali version of Times of India, Shomokamita and R. Apurad Noy. And then this is Bortoman. They have carried just one column story in the front page. So these are some of the interviews that authors have taken. This is from my blog. I have my own personal blog. There, if somebody needs, can refer to the interview. She is Shayantan Meg Ghosh, and a lawyer and also a representative of LGBTQ community. She says that the verdict will unlock numerous prospects, but all that LGBTQ community requires empathy, not sympathy. The need of the hour is to render the lesson on gender sensitization from the very inception of a child into the realms of school level. The school teachers should be enlightened with the thought process to impart the knowledge on the very issue. Second, Satakshi Ganguly has taken Ranjan Bose, actor and theatre personality. He says that patriarchy is eternal. The stereotype that I face is that people are yet to accept the concept of man getting dressed up as a woman, whereas they easily accept the vice versa. I protested against the wrong. I ignored negativity. No offense should be the tagline to overcome hurdles. Another interview that Satakshi has taken of Rahul Roy, independent filmmaker. These are all very prominent personalities in Kolkata circuit. Scrapping Section 377 is undoubtedly one colossal step against the colonial law, but this too is to remember that it only recriminalizes homosexuality. It doesn't sanction homosexual people the basic rights of marriage, property inheritance, parenting, and many other parts. So this is only the beginning, and I do hope that this legalization brings social acceptance. Then this is of Sudarshan Chakraborty, the founder of Sapphire Creations Kolkata, renowned choreographer, actor, and LGBTQ activist. I have taken this interview. So he says, the need of the hour is breaking down the gender binary and static narrative of LGBTQ community. It should not be just a cosmetic change, but a beautiful transition that will essentially wear down all kinds of negativity. In conclusion, I would say Indian culture was never too elusive of homosexuality of one's sexual orientation. It was always an inclusive culture, especially in Hinduism, be it in ancient texts or art, literature, music, dance. There was no indignity attached to it. Then when did we Indians become so alienated from our culture? As experts say, this happened when the British came to India and we were dumped with the concept of westernization for the next 200 years. The repeal of Section 377 paved the new way, but with colored glasses on. Our essential transition is necessary in our social stance. Generation young, Gen Y, should fathom that any kind of change should be insightful in one's core of heart. This paper tries to bring forth the media's perspective and people representing the LGBTQ community who swam against all societal odds to deserve dignified lives. But there are millions who fight each day their own battle to lead dignified lives. So the need of the hour is breaking down the gender binary and static narrative of LGBTQ community. It's not just the cosmetic change, but a striking move that will fundamentally wear down all kinds of pessimism. Thank you. Any questions?
Momita, I will hand over to Professor Bala for any questions or comments.
First of all, I would like to congratulate Momita for second paper in same session. That's really great to work on two papers at the same point of time and the same theme. Great, Momita. Again, if I go by your, yeah, Momita, if I go by your abstract, then objectives of your abstract, the objectives you have framed in your abstract, these are so exhaustive. Like on the one side, you're talking about media coverage in India's Eastern Metropolitan Capitals region, and then you are talking about role of Indian media and society at large on sensitive issues, and then interviews of LGBT community, and then how constructive role the media underplayed to shape public opinion. So when you are framing such objectives, I think you have to take bigger sample, not only this only Eastern metropolitan part of Kolkata. You can't replicate again the same point. In last paper that I discussed, that only gender you can't replicate on entire year. Same thing can't be replicated all over India. You can't see that the Indian media is playing such kind of role. So while drafting this abstract for any conference or for any publication, please take care the words, the terms you choose for your whatever you can do. That's okay, because I understand limitations of individual researchers. We don't have any funding. We don't have that much of time between teaching and so many things. But then frame objectives only which are really feasible to do. So one thing I would like to say, although good work, but I think when you're talking about these interviews, while analyzing interviews, you could have used some tool, some statistical software to find out the themes for factor analysis that could be done. Because When we are going for international conferences or for international publications, then they ask for these things. One, this I wanted to say. Second, again, my concern is with all the scholars. Whenever we work on any paper or any research work, first of all, we should go through the theories related to it, find out the variables, and then analyze the content or then analyze the issues. Only then proper shape of your research will come. Otherwise, whatever we do, that is very, very subjective. And the first thing that we teach in class, in any kind of research, that a researcher has to be very, very objective. So, Momita, although good efforts, and it's very, very much visible in your work, the kind of efforts both of you and your co-author have put. Great. I think.
Thank you for your observations. I will keep in mind. Thank you, ma'am.
Because I wanted to give my observation as far as research work is concerned.
Yes, this is very essential because we are all learners. We are all in the learning process.
Yes, and I think other faculty members and the other delegates, those who are present in the
here, I have included queer theory as one of the frameworks of this paper. What do you suggest about this gender the feminism perspective? Which theory do you prefer?
Because now here queer theory is much required, and there is another transgender theory. You can find that. But then the thing is that when you draft this theoretical framework, you need to corroborate your findings with that theory. Writing the theory in introduction and then not using it in the results and discussion and conclusion, then it is incomplete. You need to corroborate that theory.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Momita, and thank you, Professor Bala, once again. The final presentation for the day is by Ms. Ritika Chaudhary. She has written her paper with Dr. Suman Kumari, Faculty of Media Studies and Humanities, MRIIRS, Faridabad. The paper is titled The Role of Gender in Healthcare Communication, a study of primary healthcare center in Nagaur, Rajasthan. I ask Ms. Ritika Chaudhary to please turn on her camera and present her paper. Ms. Ritika Chaudhary.
A very good afternoon to all of you. Am I audible and visible?
Yes.
Okay. I'm really sorry. Currently, I'm not having my presentation with me because yesterday night my uncle passed away and my presentation remained in my laptop only. So I tried to get another laptop and tried to complete that presentation, but due to some issues with the laptop, I couldn't complete it so far. So I'm presenting my paper itself. Is it okay for you?
Yes, please go ahead.
The title of my study is The Role of Gender in Women Healthcare Communication, a study of a primary healthcare center in Nagaur, Rajasthan. Let's come to the introduction. As we all know, communication is an essential part of human life. It is impossible to grow and survive without communication. We always communicate, whether it is verbal communication or a non-verbal communication. We communicate through our gesture, we communicate through our expressions, we communicate through our get-up. Though all of these things communicate somehow, and but the basic requirement of a communication is to be appropriate and understood communication. Mutual understanding is a crucial part to make communication impactful. And when it comes to health communication, this becomes even more essential because the mutual understanding makes the communication impactful. A well understood communication is the apt one. There are several factors which play a significant role in determining the impact of a communication, such as age, education, gender, language, etc. These factors play a accommodated role in healthcare communication as well. There are three basic categorized gender in our society: male, female, and the third gender. And each gender has its own approach of communication and receptivity towards the communication. Every gender creates its own comfort zone when it comes to health issues, and the zone comprises because when it comes to some intimate health issues or some mental health issues. So this study talks about the role of gender in healthcare communication, uh, how gender plays a role when it comes to women healthcare communication, and intends to identify the gender gap is one of the factors in leading towards poor health state of women health. These are the studies which I reviewed for this paper. Firstly, I quoted how World Health Organization has provided a gender guideline for healthcare communication to healthcare practices, healthcare service providers. These guidelines has designed 5 steps to develop healthcare program. These steps are analysis, strategy design, message development, management, and monitoring and evaluation to make sure that these communication is enough impactful and making a mutual understanding between the healthcare provider and the patient. So, and these are the several studies which I reviewed during this study. One is Gender Barriers to Communication, which is written by Dr. Kelly S. Meyer. The other one is John Angela. Okay, I'm going forward for the objective of the study. The objectives of my studies are study are to understand the role of gender in women healthcare communication, to identify the uncomfort or discomfort issues due to gender in women healthcare communication, to assess the effectiveness of women health communication considering the role of gender. The methodology of this is a pilot study in which I assesses the role of gender in women healthcare communication. The type of the study is, it is a mixed method research which explored the role of gender in women healthcare communication and assesses the effectiveness of of women healthcare masses while contemplating the gender of healthcare provider. The data is presented in qualitative and quantitative both the manner. And in sampling, I took 30 patients, 30 female patients and 2 healthcare providers, which were from both of the gender, male and female. Data was collected through survey method and questionnaire tool was used. And data analysis was done with the quantitative analysis was done for the patient's outlook, and qualitative analysis was done for the healthcare service providers outlook. These were the questions which I asked. Let me go through the graphics. Okay. So my first question was, take in their healthcare service or their healthcare. Who was the healthcare provider? Was it a male? Was it a female? So there were 30 patients. So out of 63% having a female healthcare provider, and 37% of them prefer having a male healthcare provider. Here I asked what was their health issues, because it also depends on the issues to communicate which issues we are going for a healthcare service, and that depends on the that also matters for the communication. Like if they were having any ovarian issues, is there any pregnancy issues, is there any hygiene issues, is there any other issues like weight gaining and all, and is there any sexual transmitted issues or hormonal issues like OCD and all, OCD, PCOD and all kind of other health issues. So out of 100%, out of 17% having ovarian issues, 43% of them having pregnancy issues or reproductive issues, and 10% of them having hygiene related issues. 10% of them were having other issues like weakness or weight gaining, and 20% of them having hormonal or PCOD or as. Next I asked, did you share all the concerned aspects related to your health issues? 87% of them agreed that they confidently or very carefully shared all the issues related to their health issue, and 13% of them denied from having a proper conversation about their health issues. Next, I asked, are you satisfied with the communication of the healthcare provider? 97% of them were quite satisfied with their communication, and 3% of them was not satisfied with the communication of healthcare provider. I asked, did gender become a barrier in your healthcare communication? Out of 100%, 73% women denied that they had any sort of issue due to gender. 14% of them were having issues due to the gender of the healthcare provider, and 13% that they had minor issues with the gender of the healthcare provider. Next was, do you think the communication would have been better if the healthcare provider is of the same gender? Because if you are talking to a male, I asked if you are talking to other gender in your healthcare provider, then do you think the communication could have been better? Then 50% of them agreed that the communication would have been better if the healthcare provider is of the same gender. And next question was, are there any health issues that they feel uncomfortable in sharing with the healthcare provider from another gender? If yes, then name the issues. Then 77% of them were having issues they were uncomfortable in sharing issues with the healthcare provider from another gender. The issues were like hormonal issues, genital infections, sexual queries, breast disease, etc. Now, then I took an analysis from healthcare providers' outlook. For that, I took two healthcare providers from both the genders. One was Dr. Saroj Mirdha as a female healthcare provider, and Dr. Shailendra Lomrod as a male healthcare provider. Both are related to our JLN hospital from Nagaur itself. I belong to that only. When I asked, does the gender of a patient play any role in your healthcare communication? If yes, then how? Then both of them denied and explained that although they both are gynecologists in their respective field, but during their medical training, they are trained to treat every patient in equal manner. They might need to change their way of communication in some circumstances to make their patients well understood, but this is as similar as you change your language and tone to make the other person understood of your thoughts. When I asked, do mutual comfort and understanding exist while communicating with patients from another gender, Dr. Saroj Mirdha explained she doesn't feel any sort of discomfort in her communication with her patient due to gender difference. Although being a gynecologist, most of her patients are female only, but the comfort level is always the same when it comes to healthcare communication. Dr. Shailendra Lomrod added, I don't feel any sort of discomfort or uncomfort from my end, but due to some circumstances, I have to convince my female patients to share the issues without any hesitation so that they don't face any sort of problem. I asked them, Dr. Shailendra Lomrod has to ask them to be expressive about their issues so a better treatment can be provided accordingly. They hesitatingly share the issues related to their genital parts or sexual disease. That's the understanding issues he faces sometimes. With the proper convincing skill, it gets solved eventually. The conclusion of the study is communication is the most essential element of human growth. A barrier-free communication is the important prerequisite to assure a proper understanding and effectiveness of any communication. When it comes to healthcare communication, barrier becomes even more challenging because it can lead to unhealthy practices. Such issues need, and like gender, play a very significant role in healthcare communication, and such issues need enlightenment. On the other side, from healthcare provider perspective, although also the male healthcare provider admitted that females sometimes hesitate in sharing their health issues properly due to gender gap. Hiding issues from healthcare provider can put a person on risk, and when it comes to intimate health issues, it is even more necessary to become expressive to avoid reproductive health issues. A proper sex education and normalizing genital issues can be helpful in this matter. Here I conclude my presentation and my paper. I hope you like it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ritika. You can stop the screen share at your end.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, it is
Professor Kiran Bala, if you have any questions or comments for Ms. Ritika.
Yes, Ritika, you have taken this Nagaur district. Any reason behind it?
Reason is that I belong to Nagaur only, and currently due to lockdown issues, there is no transport facility available. So I prefer having.
PHC is located in urban area of Nagaur district, or it's in rural area?
This is situated in Nagaur. Nagaur is a district, so it is an urban area.
It's an urban area. Yes. And these two doctors, they are also posted in the same PHC?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
One is a gynecologist, Dr. Saroj Mirtha, and the other one?
Both were gynecologists.
Both. Did you find out any variables which make any communication effective?
I guess not any variables, but when I talk to the healthcare providers, they shared a lot of experiences with me that what sort of problems they have faced during the conversation with another gender of although most of their patients were female only, but from a male perspective, when I asked, they shared a lot of experiences, and they added that if there is a proper healthcare gender, if there is a proper gender communication or proper education is provided, then it can be solved. Apart from that, if co-education we prefer, and we promote co-education, like co-education means having both the genders in a manner, then it can be solved.
But I understand, yes, of course, there have been studies earlier also that in healthcare communication, gender plays a very, very important role. And yes, communication also plays a very important role in patient. But I think in such situations, when already there are so many studies available, you could have gone for action research also. But I understand this is part of your PhD thesis.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, it is.
So, if you really want to make your thesis or your papers internationally published in renowned journals, you'll area merely, talking to there's a patient, 30 patients, conducting a survey without variables, it won't help you in long term.
Sure, ma'am, I understand.
This is one area where action research can be done. Right now, you have conducted a study where there are no communication interventions. So how communication interventions can play an important role in making communication effective? Because what I understand, PHC people, they don't get such kind of trainings.
Yes,
I also keep in this because my area is also health. I have also worked, I have done some studies on healthcare communication. So this is what is lacking in Indian system, particularly where the system is owned by government. So this is one thing which you can suggest as policy, from policy perspective. Secondly, it can be a very good research study which you can do.
Okay, ma'am, I will definitely work on it too. Thank you so much for your recommendation.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ritika. As I mentioned earlier that there was a question we were getting from our student, Pratyaksha Huja. This question is for Ms. Mihika Sengupta. If you could please unmute yourself and turn on your camera. The question is, what is your opinion about how filmmakers should approach the general public and normalize the concept of LGBTQ plus and their rights as equal to everybody else? Ms. Mihika, this question is addressed to you. If you could please unmute yourself.
Okay, so if they're asking about my personal opinion, then
yes,
I would say
the student wants to know your opinion on it.
Yeah, so I would say that I liked how Shubh Mangal Zata Savdhan did what they did, than more than Ek Ladki Ko Dekha To Aisa Laga. Also because giving a personal experience, from my personal experience, I would like to say a few days back, my domestic help had come with her daughter to my house. So when my domestic help was working, so the Shubh Mangal Zada, I was watching Shubh Mangal Zada Savdhan on TV, and her daughter was sitting with me by my side, and we both were watching it. Suddenly, her mother starts laughing. Okay, seeing Ayushman Khurrana wearing that cape with all the rainbow colors, and so to my surprise, it was her daughter who said कि मम्मा आप हंस क्यों रही हो, ये तो सही कर रहा है ना, इसको तो उससे प्यार है, तो इसको तो ऐसे बोलना ही चाहिए. अगर आप शाहरुख खान को देख के तो नहीं हंसते जब वो ऐश्वर्या के पीछे भागता है, लेकिन आप आयुष्मान को देख के क्यों हंस रहे हो अगर वो उसके पीछे भाग रहा है तो. So I think even if not, so basically I cannot make my domestic people from the grassroots level, I cannot make them sit and make them watch Rituparna Ghosh's film or Satyajit Ray's artistic films for that matter, but I can make them sit and watch films like Shubh Mangal Zada Savdhan, which are starting a conversation at least that younger generation is able to understand what they're trying to put forward. So that is my opinion.
Thank you, Ms. Mehika. And with that, we come to the end of this technical session. We had 5 presentations today. The best paper presentation will be declared by Professor Kiran Bala in tomorrow's technical session. She will notify us today by the end of this day, and tomorrow in the technical session it will be declared. So all the participants are requested to attend tomorrow's session as well. And Professor Kiran Bala, I now invite you for giving your concluding remarks for this session.
Thank you, Sukriti. I think it was a great session. Researchers, academicians, all of them, they have really put so much of efforts in conducting such studies. I think this is need of the hour. There are research studies required on gender issues, on women's studies, and how women's cells are operating all over India or in other organizations. I think there is some absence of research on the relationship between gender identity, gender expression, and gender equality with respect to trans people, with respect to LGBTQ community, because right now it shows that there is invisibility within the public discourse and the policy on I would say empowerment or disempowerment. So we need more studies, and scholars, they need to tackle of course the critical, political and institutional challenges to conduct such studies. But I think we can do, and it will be really great for media education and social sciences research.
Thank you, ma'am, for your remarks. Lastly, I would just like to mention the best paper presenter for yesterday's technical session, that is technical session 2. The paper that is going to Ms. Sakshi Grover Arya and Dr. O.P. Dewal of Indira Gandhi National Open University, New Delhi, for their paper titled Freedom of Expression, Issues and Trends in Hindi Cinema. So our congratulations to these researchers. And now moving forward, I ask my co-host Yogesh Bish to take it from here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. I would like to request Professor Dr. Susmita Bala, Head DME Media School and Chief Associate Convener of ICAN4, to please give the concluding remarks.
Thank you, Yogesh. It was really a brainstorming session. The authors talked about feminism in cinema coverage of women issues in media, the third gender, and the space given to LGBTQ. It was enlightening to me. I think it would have been the same to everybody. Thanks to Kiran Bala ma'am to chairing the session, and thanks to everybody presented paper. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Now, I would like to thank Professor Dr. Kiran Bala for agreeing to chair this session and her wonderful inputs to the researchers. I would also extend my gratitude to Professor Dr. Ambrish Saxena and Professor Dr. Susmita Bala for the ideation and planning of all the sessions. I would like to thank Ms. Sukruti Arora, Ms. Manmeet Kaur, Dr. Manusvi Maheshwari, Ms. Shruti V.S., Ms. Mudita Raj, and Mr. Pramod Kumar Pandey for their constant support and guidance. A heartfelt thank to Mr. Ritik Ghosh, Mr. Sumantra Sarthidas, Mr. Sachin Nair, and Mr. Yogesh Sharma for providing the overall digital operations in ICAN4. I would also like to thank our newsletter and media team comprising of both students and faculty members, namely Ms. Krishna Pandey, Mr. Mohammad Kamil, Ms. Sukruti Arora, and Dr. Teenam Bora for constantly supervising and motivating everyone. I would also like to thank Mr. Anmol Mehta for tirelessly working in making our events look more beautiful digitally, so with the help of his prolific designs. I would also like to thank our entire team, all faculty members and students who have worked day and night facing all the challenges and obstacles of the pandemic to make this conference happen. Lastly, I thank all our participants who joined this session, worked so hard on their research papers, and our audience for being here and contributing. I request everyone to follow our social media handles for more updates and information. Don't forget to visit the DME website and the ICAN4 Micro website for any or all details. Stay tuned with us for the upcoming session, Masterclass on Rumors and Public Perceptions of COVID-19 Vaccine, Role of Media with Mr. Nimish Kapoor, starting at 3 p.m.